Welcome to part 13 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing Polymouse, aka Milen Habrele. I am going to apologize in advance because I will more than likely call Polymouse Multimouse at least once during the course of this video. If somebody wants to keep track of how many times I accidentally call her Multimouse instead of Polymouse, please do so in the comments, because I actually want to know how many times I tripped up on saying her name. Anyways, design-wise, I do like how she came out. However, I want to just note something here. She is still meant to be on the rounder, more chubbier side. And I did initially sketch her like that, but after I did the outlining and the coloring, it didn't look like that. So here's a picture of before that. You can kind of see that her back has a little bit of chub and that her stomach is rounder. Unfortunately though, after doing the line art, I lost a lot of that detail. So apologies for that. Anyway though, let us talk about Milen, cause oh, I have thoughts. Now, I have never outwardly slandered a character in this series. However, today is that day. Milen has the personality of a wet paper towel. This girl has 3 personality traits, those being environmentalist, afraid of everything, and being Ivan's girlfriend. Those are her personality traits. I mean, props to her for being an environmentalist. This planet is currently fucked. We need more people like her. And I get being afraid of things. I think everybody's afraid of something to some extent. But when being afraid of things is one of your only personality traits, it gets annoying after a while. Like, yes, she's also kind, something that we see pretty frequently, and witty, something that I think we need to see more, but they don't come across as often as her being afraid of everything does. And I was joking when I said her being Ivan's girlfriend was one of her personality traits, but also I feel like we rarely ever see them without each other. So take that as you will. Anyway, I believe I have talked about before how within this series, sometimes designs just spring into existence. Yeah, this kind of happened here. Now, I do like Polymouse's designs. I like her new one slightly more than her old one. However, I prefer Multimouse Marinette's transformation with the Mouse Miraculous over both of Milen's. So yeah, I've also declared that I have waged war against the skin-tight suits, and I'm trying to avoid them as much as possible. Hence where we got to what you will be seeing in full at the end of this video. However, how did we get there? First off, I obviously wanted it to look like a mouse because it is the Mouse Miraculous. And that, in retrospect, was not too hard to do. All it really takes to make something look like a mouse is to give it the ears and the tail. And actually, I was so encapsulated in that I almost forgot to give her jump rope, which is her tail. The handles? I obviously did end up remembering because she has them. Only one is visible here purely because of the layout of her pose. It would not have made sense for her to have both being shown, but yes, both sides have handles. And then she also obviously has her ears, which I did consider taking a page out of season 6's book and making her hair her ears. However, I decided not to do that, and I'm glad I decided that. I made her gloves and boots pink because if you look at a mouse, the only things on a mouse that are pink are their hands, feet, paws, question mark, I don't know, and tail. Nothing else on a mouse is pink. Is now actually a good time to mention that I don't really like mice? Anyway, I think that could be a reason why I don't really like either of Polymouse's designs all that much. They kind of overuse the pink. There's almost too much pink. Her original design uses 1 shade of gray and 2 different shades of pink. Meanwhile, her new design sort of offsets it a little bit more by using still 2 shades of pink. However, it also now uses 2 shades of gray, which is why I kind of prefer her new one over her original. But I feel like they're still too detailed. Simple is sometimes good, and that's why I prefer Multimouse's design. Her design is a lot more simple. It's predominantly gray and black with pink accents. So I sort of did that here with it being predominantly gray with black and pink accents. I also made her belly white just for some added contrast. When it comes to rewriting her, I really want to use more of that wit that we don't get to see as much in canon. She will be nowhere near as witty as Cat Noir, however she will still be witty. More in her day-to-day than in her hero form though. Skipping ahead a little bit, I really wanted to show the process of me doing her hair this time, because I decided to change her hair both in her hero form and her casual form to be very thick, very tight curls because I thought that that would be cute, and it did end up being cute. They are pink in her hero form and blonde in her casual form, and I did that because what is going on with her canon hair? And though there are probably many different methods to drawing tight curls, I used this one that I learned years ago, which is pretty much just to do a coil pattern like this. And then you just sort of do that in layers a couple times till you have a decent bunch of hair. We're coming up on the end here, and I guess I really didn't slander her as much as I thought I would. The next character on the list is Purple Tigress, but in the meantime, tell me what you think of Polymouse. Welcome to part 14 of my Miraculous Redesign series, where today we are doing the character that I've been wanting you guys to see for a while now, Purple Tigress, aka Julica Cafen. Strap in, because this is a long one, and this voiceover may either benefit from that or suffer from it. We will see. Now, a little bit of context, I only recorded about a quarter of her drawing process, and it was still a lot of footage to edit and trim down. So if this part doesn't feel as in-depth as the rest of the series, that is why. Now, if you haven't already figured it out, for her suit, I decided to go with a more punk-inspired look. Now, punk is technically a mentality and music-based subculture, mostly in this idea of rebellion. Now, because of that, you don't inherently need to dress punk to be punk. And that actually works as a somewhat smooth transition into my rewrite of the Cafen family. We'll get to canon and rewrite Julica-centric stuff in a bit. However, I want to cover the family first because they've been on my mind a lot. First thing that I want to change is, well, not really change, but music is this family's livelihood. Taking music away from them would be like taking away a normal person's ability to breathe. And so, because of that, they have soft spots for and like just about every genre in some way, shape, and form. However, they do all have their favorites. For examples, Anarka likes older rock, think Beatles, while also having a soft spot for jazz. Luca's a bona fide metalhead with soft spots for pop and pop-punk music. While Julica is also a rock person, but also more gothic. However, her soft spot is for pop songs, specifically love songs, with added bonus points if they are all queer-coded. Because this girl is a lesbian, and I will not be hearing an argument on that. I will hear arguments out for other characters, however, she is not one of them. No joke, I have been shipping Rose and Julica since before I knew what shipping was. But we have already talked about Rose, so let's talk about Julica. And to say something that I've been saying a lot recently, what did they do to her character? I went back and rewatched Reflecta for the sake of this video. And let me just say this, Julica had always been shy, but upon rewatching it, I realized just how much more shy and quiet they made her in the later seasons. In the earlier seasons, even though she was shy and quiet, we as the audience could still hear her. However, in the later seasons, she just mumbles. Now, I'm not holding that against the character, I'm holding that against the writers. Actually, I could hold most of this stuff against the writers. But I think that was a stupid decision, and it is being overruled. You know another decision I think was stupid? Calling her Purple Tigress when her suit is practically freaking red! And in case you haven't seen her original suit, because this is specifically talking about her original, or you just need a little refresher to the brain, here's a picture. The only thing purple on her are the roots of her hair. The design is also just straight boring. However, they at least fixed the design for her season 6 outfit. Here's a picture of that. Is it less boring? Yes. Is it still not purple? Also yes. But who knows, maybe when we actually see her wearing it and in motion in the show, it'll look more purple. But I do sort of doubt that. I've sort of been joking that Luca sacrificed all his looks and handed them over to Julica because he has the opposite problem. I don't want to make this about Luca, but I have a lot of time left to fill, and I just sort of want to talk about this because it's kind of funny to me. Anyway, here is his original design. We know it, we love it, it's a classic. Is it the best of the original designs? No. Is it the worst? Also no. But then, here's his new design. Is it awful? No. Has it grown on me with time? Yes. But the design is so uneven and so unbalanced that it just looks weird. There is too much going on the top half of his body and not enough going on the lower half that it just looks weird. It might look better once we see it in motion. That is the excuse I'm using for a lot of these. We will see. I don't think it will, but we will see. Anyway though, when it came to redesigning Purple Tigress, I wanted to make sure she was actually purple this time. However, I wasn't quite sure what range I wanted that purple to be in, so I did some color tests, as I tend to do now, and I did 3 tests. One that was the sort of more dark magenta-y color in a similar range to her original design, and one that was more of a true purple, neither of which I liked. So for the heck of it, I decided I was going to do a third design, or a third color test, that pretty much had me layering the frickin' true purple with a very couple thin layers of the red purple over it, and then color picking that and doing a color test with that purple, and it looked really good, and that's sort of what I wound up going with, though the purple I initially colored her with wound up being too blue, so I wound up having to go in with a pinky magenta color to even it out a bit, and then my phone camera proceeded to oversaturate it and make it very red looking, fixed it at the end. You will be seeing that shortly though, because once again, this is long, because I only recorded about a quarter of her process. Here are some things that I couldn't record, but I wanted to share / mention. First off, I switched her tail. In canon, her tail is like these 3 ropes that sort of wrap around her waist like a belt, with these 3 balls on the ends. I moved those balls to be on a chain around her waist because I wanted to give her an actual tiger's tail. And also, have we ever seen her use those? And actually, here's the part I was telling you about where I'm color correcting everything. I did most of it off camera purely because drawing around the stripes was annoying. Another thing I did was curve her ears. They gave her pointy ears in canon, which makes no sense to me, because tigers don't have pointy ears, they have curved ears. So I gave her curved ears here. Her hair is sort of a mix between her season 6 hair and Rena Rouge's hair. I did that because I really just wanted to give her a really thick, fluffy, layered ponytail, and it wound up looking really good. As you will see at the end, the colors for that wound up being black and purple. However, while I was coloring, because I did the purple tips first, it looked like this very briefly. Most of the reason why I'm showing this to you is because I thought it looked cool. In terms of rewrite stuff, Julika's not going to change that much. I might do a whole nother video just on the Cuffen family because I have a lot more I want to talk about there. And I'm sort of running out of time. I really got to figure out how to designate time better. Anyway, I wound up switching out the gold trim around her stripes from her canon design with a silver trim around the stripes that was originally meant to look like stitching, but I got lazy. However, it looks good either way. I was supposed to mention this at the start, however I'm mentioning it now. Her jacket was originally going to be a more leather-like material. However, I wanted her to have one sleeve completely torn off because of that like mechanical hand thing, so it's actually more of a denim-like material. Anyway, if you have any questions that I didn't answer here, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I will try my best to answer as many of them as I can. Next character on the list is Miss Hound. Also, apologies that this took longer than I said it was gonna. I got kind of stuck while doing the voiceover. However, I really hope she was worth the wait and that you like her as much as I do. Welcome to part 15 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing Miss Hound. Spoilers ahead, I haven't said that part in several videos, but oh well. But yes, so today we are doing Miss Hound, aka Sabrina Rencompre, and I do like what I wound up doing with her, because, well, okay, Miss Hound's original canonical design sucked. What was going on with that? But her season 6 design, her season 6 design was really good. It had me at a point of like, what the heck do I do? But I do like what I wound up doing. And she sort of accidentally wound up matching my Queen Bee redesign. I will show a picture of that at the end. But so when it came to her outfit, I really wanted to base the pattern of everything and the colors off of a specific dog breed. Now, I do think they tried to do that with the canon Miss Hound design. However, her color palette is white, orange, and black. You know who else's color palette is white, orange, and black? Reno Rouge! I'm really trying to not use the same color palettes on characters here, hence why I changed frickin' Ryuko's many parts ago. So, yeah, I knew I had to at least tweak it a little bit. So I begun researching. Common sense would have told me to do a golden retriever. However, golden retrievers are kinda boring. Their fur is one solid color with essentially no defining details, so yeah, they were out. However, more research yielded an idea that I had been considering for a while, but said research just sort of cemented it. I wound up basing her design off of a German Shepherd. German Shepherds are pretty intelligent as far as dogs go. They're pretty loyal, they're alert, they're stubborn, they're protective, they're watchful. They are a lot of things that I would almost consider Sabrina to be. On top of that, they are also phenomenal tracking dogs, which is why they are commonly used by hunters and are considered hunting dogs. And it is also for that reason, or at least similar reasons, why they are also used by police. And, well, her dad is a cop. So everything just sort of fell into place. Now, I bring that part up because I've decided to commit to an idea that's been lingering in the back of my head for a while now. And that is that, well, for context, the Miraculous power scale is very imbalanced. Some characters have these really overpowered OP-ass abilities, and then some characters have these abilities that make you question what the heck they're good for. So, Miss Hound is now going to have a secondary tracking ability alongside her fetch ability. She can use each ability individually, or she can use them at the same time, but that's a bit more difficult and complicated, and I'm still trying to figure out the logistics of that, but it's something that I want to do with her. And yes, fetch can be a pretty damn overpowered ability if you use it correctly, i.e., see the time Felix used it to steal all the Miraculous to trade him to Gabriel in exchange for the Peacock Miraculous. Personally, I think that was a shitty trade, but you know, whatever. And I wouldn't even necessarily call that the Miraculous itself being wildly overpowered. I would more just call that Felix not being an idiot. But you know, Sabrina is very much one of those characters who I would say, despite not having a lot of screen time, actually had quite a bit of development. She very much went from being Chloe's goon and yes woman, if you would, to very much growing into her own character. Even if at times the development was slow and she reverted back to her old ways on occasion, in the end, she's grown quite a bit as a character, and I am really excited to see what they do with her in the future. However, this is a redesign and rewrite series, so how are we rewriting her? Well, not much is changing. There's really only gonna be one big thing that has some ripple effects over the course of the rewrite, and that is that her and Chloe's friendship was fake. At least for the first part of the rewrite. Pretty much, Sabrina's dad, Roger, and Andre Bourgeois, Chloe's dad, had a deal that was if Sabrina pretended to be Chloe's friend, Andre would pay for her school's tuition. I've mentioned before, at least I think I've mentioned before, that I'm shipping the cast off to a private school. My hope is that that sort of helps round out both Chloe and Sabrina's characters. Back on design stuff for a moment here. If you look at the fur patterns of German Shepherds, I wound up sort of following that pattern when it came to designing the patterning for her suit, and it wound up giving this very simple but nice looking design, which I don't know about you, but I really like. I know I already sort of mentioned how she and my Queen Bee redesign wound up sort of matching, but they also wound up sort of contrasting each other in the ways of their characters. In my rewrite, Sabrina is going to be a little bit more shy and a little bit more closed off, at least to start. In most media, a character with those traits would probably be depicted in some form of baggy clothes. Meanwhile, Chloe is very confident, very outgoing. Well, not really outgoing, but you know what I mean. And a character like that in a lot of media would maybe be depicted wearing something a little bit more skin tight. But for the both of them, I wound up doing the opposite. For anyone who hasn't seen it, here is my Queen Bee redesign. Overall, her suit is quite a bit baggier with only a few features here and there that show any form of a potential figure. And as previously stated, Miss Hound is the complete opposite. Anyways, we are coming up on the end here, and I have to apologize for this being almost a week late. In return, I'm gonna try and give you guys 2 parts next week instead of 1. Next character on the roster is Rooster Bold, whom I am very excited to show you guys. Anyway, here is the completed Miss Hound redesign. I really hope you guys like it. And as promised previously, her and Queen Bee side by side. Welcome to part 16 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing Rooster Bold, aka Marc-en-Ciel. Spoilers ahead. Now, along with this being part 16, this is also the first of the final 5 characters within this series. Yep, counting this, we only have 5 more characters to go. Goddamn, I can't believe it's almost over. Also, I have to apologize for some wonky lighting while filming this. I tried to film in a different location than I normally do. However, that just made it look kinda weird, so if it switches halfway through, that's why. But now that that's all out of the way, let us talk about Mark. First off, I love this boy, which is honestly a little bit of a surprise to me. Well, okay, not really, but I gotta explain my complicated history with this boy. First off, part of what you need to understand is I was a literal child when Season 2 released. Therefore, I didn't always understand what was going on. And so because of that, when Reverser dropped, I thought that was going to be the last we were going to see of his character. Maybe mentioned on occasionally here and there, maybe appearing in the background on occasion, but I honestly didn't think we were ever really going to get much of him. And in the mind of my, gosh, I don't even remember how old I was at the time, self, that was great, because I really didn't like him all that much. Because in my mind, as the main character, Marinette could do no wrong, and Nathaniel, as nerdy little art boy, also could do no wrong. So that led to me just mentally despising Mark for many, many years. What also didn't help was the fact that Season 2 was the last season I actually watched somewhat consistently. And I did watch the first half of Season 3, but it was the first half of Season 3 according to Netflix, so wildly out of order and just really incorrect and hard to follow. So after that, I just sort of stopped watching. And then the yearly Miraculous phases started hitting me in 2021. So I finally finished Season 3, if still out of order, and then I went back and rewatched Seasons 1 and 2. And that's when I realized how wrong my younger self was about Mark. Suddenly I loved this boy and swore to protect him at all costs. Fast forward another year to 2022, and I believe at that point the first half of Season 4 was up on Disney Plus for my viewing pleasure, so I cozied up to watch it, and we're getting more of Mark and Nathaniel together. And then I'm like, do I ship this? Because I had figured out what shipping was at that point. And let's just say, if it weren't for those two, I wouldn't know what AO3 is. And now they're more or less canon, so who's winning here? Anyway, design stuff. I absolutely despise Rooster Bold's original design with a flaming passion that burns hotter than 1,000 hells. I've gone on before about how some characters' canon designs are severely under-designed. However, the reverse is also true because, what is that? What were they trying to do there? It was so wildly over-designed that it just looks bad. However, although we have not seen much of it yet, I do think they have redeemed themselves with the Season 6 design. Here it is. Now that is so far the best shot we've gotten of it from the front. However, we have gotten a much better shot from it shoulders up. Oh, he just looks so happy. And actually, when talking about his original design compared to his Season 6 design, I wouldn't say they overhauled it completely. More like they kept the elements that worked and trashed the elements that didn't. It's just that a lot of it didn't work. And I myself actually wound up keeping a lot of the elements that did work. So what were the things that did work? Well, the things that worked were the things that are seen in both his original design and his Season 6 designs. The red mohawk and the bright red cravat. I kept both of those things because, for one, they worked. For two, they are references to things seen on roosters. The mohawk is meant to reference that little head doohickey on roosters' heads that I believe is called a comb. And then the cravat is meant to be that little thing around their necks just under their beak, which is actually apparently called a weddle. So I wound up keeping both of those. The rest of his design took me a little while to pin down because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with him. All I knew for sure is that I wanted to keep the mohawk and the cravat, and then that he kind of needed tailcoats because tail feathers. After that, I had nothing. Until there was this little voice nagging me in the back of my head telling me to put him in a corset. Or at least something corset-like. And I told myself I wasn't gonna do that. And then I wound up doing that. But it really did help me settle on the rest of his design. So I wound up doing this deep teal suit jacket with tailcoats, and over that is this corset-like thing in a slightly lighter shade of teal. And then under all of that is this orange bodysuit that was meant to be a little bit more of a rusty orange, but honestly, it all wound up working out in the end. And yes, as you've seen over the course of this video, and as I'm coloring them now, I put him in heels. And I mean, his Season 6 design did it. Here's a picture. Am I aware that it is impractical? Yes. Do I care? No. Because you know what else is impractical? The rooster's ability. When they first introduced it, it was this overpowered OP-ass ability that allowed it so that the user could use any superpower that they chose. And then they realized that it was wildly overpowered, and then they nerfed it to the point of it just being impractical and kind of dumb. But here's the thing, they only nerfed it after the Shadybug and Claw Noir special. Because in that special, Gabriel uses the Rooster Miraculous to open portals to other universes, but then the fact that that happened and the fact that that can even do that is just never mentioned ever again. All of that is to say, I've thought about changing it, I just don't know what I would change it to. But luckily I have plenty of time to think about that. However, I do not have a lot of time to think on this boy's character rewrite, even though I already have an idea in mind for it, which is lucky because I'm moving his introduction up to Season 1. Most of the reason why I'm moving it up is just because I want to. And then I'm also putting him in the same class and the same grade as most of the rest of the cast. Because originally, to me at least, it was implied that they were in the same grade, but they just had a different homeroom, which to me made sense, but apparently he's a whole grade below the rest of them. So I'm moving him to be in the same grade and the same homeroom as the rest of them. Anyway, we're coming up on the end here. Next character on the list is Caprikid, but in the meantime, tell me what you think of my Rooster Bold redesign. Welcome to part 17 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing Caprikid, aka Nathaniel Kurtzberg. Spoilers for the entirety of Miraculous Ladybug are ahead, so please be warned. Now, when I decided to do this series and I decided that I was going to redesign the entire cast, I thought he was going to be one of the easier ones. Season 6 hadn't dropped yet, and there might have been a teaser here or there, but we hadn't seen Caprikid's redesign yet. But, given the fact that this was his original, I figured that just about anything I could come up with was going to be better than that. And then Season 6 did drop, and we finally saw his redesign, and it's so good! They overhauled the design just about completely, and it was needed. The only things they really kept were the color palette and then the fur collar around the neck, which was arguably the best part of the original. But the thing about a really good redesign is that it then stumps me into not knowing what I'm gonna do. So when it came to Caprikid, I sketched the pose and then let it sit for a couple of days while I tried to find some form of inspiration. His redesign has this sort of 1970s vibe to it, so I wanted to do something along those lines, but not quite. And I did end up doing just that, finding inspiration in what could be considered an unlikely place, that being this iconic Freddie Mercury look from 1986. I know originally I said I wanted to do something a little bit more 70s inspired, but at this point, I really didn't care all that much. If it wound up leaning more 80s, fine by me. After all that, he wound up with these high-waisted pants with a fur trim along the sides and ankles, a jacket with fur along the cuffs of the sleeves and the tops of the shoulders, and these chunky boots that I stole from his season 6 design because they look cool. I actually wound up showing the finished product to a friend of mine, and he said he looked like he could be a member of My Chemical Romance from the Black Parade music video, and I can't say he's fully wrong. Stepping away from design stuff for a minute. Oh, Nathaniel, my poor boy. The season 6 episode, The Ruler, which at this moment is one of the more recent episodes, revealed a lot about Nathaniel's home life, and oh, I feel so bad for this boy. Look, I'm glad we got the episode for the sake of his character and his character's development, but God, did they need to put him through the ringer like that? And us, the audience, through the ringer like that? Because, geez, needless to say, I almost cried several times while watching that episode. But all that is to say, Nathaniel needed the development and the screen time. I do think he was always meant to be one of the more main side characters. If he was meant to get a Miraculous and be a hero since the beginning, there is a certain group of people who know, and I am not a part of that group, so I can only assume. But yeah, the episode was really needed. He hasn't had a even somewhat centric episode since Evillustrator, all the way back in season 1, and I actually went back and rewatched Evillustrator for this, and why is that episode just weird visually? Like, everyone is simultaneously too expressive, but also not expressive enough, and there's simultaneously too much movement going on, but also not enough movement. Like, was Evillustrator one of the first episodes they animated? Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. All of that is to say, Nathaniel is canon bisexual king, and we love him for it. And let's be honest, for as much as I know some people probably ship it, Marina and Nathaniel would not have worked out all that well, which is why I am really happy that they introduced Mark and got the two of them together. Even if the start of their relationship was a little rough. But I'm glad to see they finally got their shit together. Now, you guys are lucky I don't have a lot of time to rant about them. However, I really like Mark's new casual design. Should maybe talked about that in Rooster Bold's video, but I didn't have time. Anyway, back to design stuff. Now, overall, when it comes to Caprikid's Season 6 redesign, there's only one nitpick I somewhat see, and that is about his horns and how they gave him ram's horns, male sheep horns, and not goat's horns. To which I say, I think I kind of have a bit of an explanation for you. Well, okay, not really an explanation, but some context. There are 19 Miraculous featured within the Chinese Miracle Box, which is the one that we follow. Of those 19, 12 are based off of the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. And that's where shit can get a little confusing, because depending on what source you're citing, 3 of the animals change. But only kind of. Using the animals picked for Miraculous, the 3 in question are mouse, goat, and pig. Mouse is usually actually said to be a rat, however I get why they used a mouse in the context of Miraculous. It's a bit more child-friendly, kids are less likely to get squeamish by it, I get it. Pig is one that there's a bit of dispute on. Some sources will say it's actually meant to be a boar or a wild hog, but pig is the more commonly sourced one. Goat is where some sources switch and say that it's actually a sheep and not a goat. And if anybody has watched the Fruits Basket anime or read the manga, you know exactly what I mean by that. And if you haven't, I actually highly recommend it. But if you're watching the anime, just make sure it's the 2019 version. Conclusion, I'm actually a-okay with them having given him ram's horns, and I, in fact, also gave him ram's horns. Mostly because they looked nicer. But also just because I don't really feel like it matters all that much. Goats and sheep are very similar. We confuse them all the time in today's society. And again, I just don't think it really matters all that much, especially considering the fact that his horns are quite literally his Miraculous, which is a cool concept and all, but also like only half makes sense. But you know what, I'm not gonna judge it too harshly, because compared to potential alternatives, it's actually fantastic. The alternative being extremely bulky earrings. Anyway, I wound up coloring his horns to be silver. I believe I did his mask off camera, and I also dulled his hair slightly with a brown just to make it look a little bit more natural. In terms of rewrite stuff though, there's not really much to change when it comes to Nathaniel. Despite how little screen time he's gotten, he's a pretty well-written character when we do see him. He has his flaws, but he's working through them. He has his strengths, and he uses them to his advantage. So in the end, not much needs to be changed. Anyway, I hope you like my Caprikid redesign. Next on the list is MinatorOx. Please feel free to tell me what you think in the comments. Welcome to part 18 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing MinatorOx, aka Ivan Brule. Spoilers ahead. Now, when it came to designing the redesign for MinatorOx, I was stumped, as I find myself being quite often these days. However, this time was sort of the opposite of a lot of the previous times. You see, I had an idea on what I wanted to do. Not a super clear idea, but an idea. However, it didn't end up working. Now, to elaborate before I get any further in telling you what that initial idea was, I probably could have made it work with a little bit more time and effort. However, I had already redrawn his pose twice. I was tired with him, I was reaching the end of my rope, and I was in a massive bout of writer's block for chapter 3, which I'm still kind of in, but you know, I sort of just wanted to get it done. So what was that idea? Well, I was going to put him in a Spanish matador outfit. And for those of you wondering, wait, what's that? It's the outfit that bullfighters wear. And if you're still wondering what that is, if you've seen Skate the Infinity, it's what Adam's outfit is based on. And if you still don't know what I'm talking about, here's a picture. Now, that's not the only way they can look. The general silhouette is pretty standardized, however, the patterns can be different, and the patterns can be very detailed and very intricate, and it's not that scared me away from putting MinatorOx in that kind of outfit. In fact, that made me want to do it even more. But when it came down to actually putting him in the outfit, it just didn't look right. From the images I found while doing my research for this, matadors are usually tall, skinny, lanky dudes. They don't really have builds like the one I gave Ivan. So again, all of that together, it just didn't look right. Again, I probably could have made it work had I tried a little harder, but it was at that point I needed to just put the piece down for a couple of days and rethink my options. And then I remembered a scrapped design idea from back when I was doing Pegasus. Yeah, remember that guy from about 9 parts ago? Remember how in his video I mentioned that I vaguely considered making him cowboy inspired? Well, here we are! Man, I love being able to save a scrapped idea from development hell. However, I was even hesitant to do that. Mostly because it's one of those things that have been done many times when it comes to the Ox Miraculous. But then I came to the conclusion of, screw it. It's been done so many times because it's genuinely a good idea. And thus, MinatorOx became cowboy inspired. Actually, not even inspired, just straight up a cowboy. And I am absolutely here for it, considering what I was given to work with, because here's a reminder of his original design. Look, I know I give the people who designed a lot of the original suits a lot of shit, and I will acknowledge that a lot of that should more be targeted to whoever approved these designs, but actually, what the fuck is that? I mean, hey, at least they redeemed themselves with Season 6. Season 6 is just the redemption arc for the character design team, and it is a redemption arc that I am here for. Anyway, when it came to choosing his mask, I was stumped for a couple of minutes, but then I was just like, screw it, let's give him one of those face masks that's like kind of meant to be like a bit of a bandana. However, I'm kind of salty about it because I had originally drawn his face perfectly. Here's a picture. Why is it that when I draw a feature on one of these characters and it turns out perfect, it ends up getting covered by something else? And wow, I have spent way too much time talking about design stuff. Let's talk about character stuff. First off, I do like Ivan. However, I wish we'd gotten to see more of him throughout the first 5 seasons. I feel like if you were to total up his amount of screen time within the first 5 seasons, it would come out to maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour max. So yeah, he's very much a character that I wish we had gotten to see more of. However, I am glad that we have actually gotten a more Ivan-centric episode within Season 6, that being El Toro de Piedra, and that wasn't an episode I knew we needed. Ivan's one of those characters that I felt that despite his minimal screen time, was a fairly fleshed out character, at least by Miraculous standards. But then, as previously stated, El Toro de Piedra came out and my thoughts on that changed. Suddenly, I realized how little we knew about so many characters, not just Ivan, but many others. How, when it came to the home lives of much of the cast, there was only a handful of which we actually knew what they were like. And that's another place where I think Season 6 is kind of winning. We're getting to see the home lives of a lot more of the cast, much of which we've never seen before. We've seen more of Sabrina, we've seen a glimpse at Mark, we've seen Nathaniel's, and relevant to this video, we've seen Ivan's. And when it comes to Ivan's home life and me rewriting it, it's gonna be kind of the same, but also extremely different. His dad is still gonna be a criminal, however, he gives older brother vibes, so that's gonna be a thing now. Now, I wound up doing a lot of the finishing details off camera. However, what I'm doing here is just brightening up the orange and doing the rest of the orange accents. And also, on the note of almost unnoticeable detail, I almost forgot to draw spurs on his boots. And then I also wound up putting the horns on the hat, which I really like. You might not like it, but I like it. Anyway, as we're coming up on the end here, I really like how he came out. I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Also, apologies if I sounded a little stuffy throughout the second half of this video. I found myself getting sick about halfway through doing his voiceover, so you know. Anyway, the next character on the list is Bunnyx, but in the meantime, tell me what you think of my MinatorOx redesign in the comments. Welcome to part 19 of my Miraculous redesign series, where today we are doing Bunnyx, aka Alex Clubdel. Spoilers ahead. Now, before anybody asks, yes, I have seen the new episode. However, I'm gonna save most of my thoughts for another video down the line. However, teasing Miraculous Brazil, anyone? And I'm gonna leave that there so we can get into Bunnyx. Now, when it came down to arranging the order for the series, there were technically 2 places I could have put Bunnyx. Obviously, there's where she is right now, as you're seeing her, part 19. However, she could have been part 11 instead of King Monkey. And that was purely due to the existence of older Bunnyx from Season 3, Episode 18, Time Tagger. However, I decided linear timeline characters only, which is why Bunnyx is part 19 instead of part 11. Anyway, when it came down to designing her, I knew I wanted her to be very fun, kind of athletic, but mostly fun. But aside from that, I had nothing. Or, correction, little to nothing. Because, purely based off of color palette, Bunnyx's original design always sort of gave me Alice in Wonderland vibes, specifically Disney's Alice in Wonderland, and that seemed like a fair comparison given her outfit being blue and white, the same color as Alice's in the movie, and Fluff, Alex's Kwame, being a white rabbit. And so that got me thinking, if we were to take Alice's dress and convert it into something Alex would wear, what would that look like? For starters, the skirt had to go. Personally, I don't think Alex would be caught dead in a dress. So then I was like, well, what would she wear? Shorts. However, I still wanted to keep that puffy element of the skirt, so she wound up with these puffy shorts that sort of bunch at her thighs. The rest of the outfit sort of put itself together from there. I wanted to put her ears on a hood, give her a sweater. I wanted it to be short because shorts, let's make it cropped. I wanted the sleeves to be poofy like the shorts. Okay, let's make them poofy and then have them bunch at the wrists. I wanted her to come off as athletic. Let's give her sneakers. So yeah, that was basically my thought process. Honestly, a lot less thought than what normally goes into these characters. But I do really like it. I think I was able to convey all the things I wanted to convey while keeping the essence of her character. Now, and this may come off as a little ironic, but I actually quite like Bunnyx's original design. That is, depending on which one of her originals we are referring to, because she technically has 3. First off, there is linear timeline 15-year-old Alex. It's fine, it's cute, it works. They could have done more, but I get why they didn't, considering the fact that we had already seen her at age 25 with this outfit. I think it's fairest to compare those two outfits, given that they're designed to directly build off of each other. However, my overall favorite of the Bunnyx designs is her at age 70, as seen in the London special. There's also, like, no way she's actually 70. 50, maybe. 70? Have the creators seen a 70-year-old? Either that, or Alex is working with some really good genetics. But I think the reason why elderly Bunnyx is my favorite of the designs is purely because it leans into that sort of White Rabbit, Alice in Wonderland vibe, which actually leads me into something I am adding to my rewrite for Bunnyx. Her suit will now change to match whatever the style of clothing in the time and place she's in is, if that makes any sense. Example, if she were in Victorian England, she'd be dressed like she was in Victorian England. That is if I choose to keep her ability as time travel. Look, okay, I'm split on it. I know often when people rewrite Miraculous, they do change the rabbit's ability. One that I see pretty commonly is taking the multiplication aspect away from the mouse and just making the mouse growing and shrinking and giving the multiplication aspect to the rabbit. However, the reason why I'm on the fence about changing it is because I read a comment once. I can't remember from who or where, but it was regarding the rabbit and the snake Miraculouses, about how, if you really think about it, they are both timeline defense. The snake Miraculous stops stuff from going wrong by preventing it from going wrong, by going back to a point before it happened. Meanwhile, the rabbit is the one that fixes stuff after shit has already gone wrong. Examples of this are Time Tagger, Cat Blanc, and for whatever reason, not Ephemeral. Like, Ephemeral would have been the perfect episode to feature Bunnyx, but instead, they used Sass in the Snake Miraculous, because that makes so much goddamn sense. But yeah, conclusion, considering changing it, I might not. Either way, this will remain her suit. Now, in terms of personality, when it comes to Canon Alex, say it with me now, we don't know that much about her. But just sort of generally speaking, she's generally a good person. She's a bit of a competitive streak. She made a lot of bets with Kim in the earlier seasons, which I'm kind of sad they stopped doing. But yeah, no, in terms of rewrite, I'm just gonna flesh her out a bit more, because she kind of needs it. Then again, who doesn't at this point? Because the answer is just most of the cast. Seriously, at least within the first 5 seasons, the writers did not do a very good job at fleshing out most of the cast. Anyways, we are at the point of doing just some of the more finishing touches on the design. Here, I'm mostly doing shading, however, I want to draw attention to her mask. She has one of the lower covering face mask style masks, which was last seen on MinatorOx. Quite literally last episode. However, hers has a little bit more to it. Her mask is retractable, and though everybody with the face masks can pull them down, hers has a little bit more to it. Note, I came up with the idea after I drew the design, so that's why what I mentioned isn't seen. But she has little buttons that would hook around her ears that she can press, which cause the mask to either retract and open up, or close and cover her face. Anyways, we are coming up on the end here. Next character on the list is Argos. In the meantime, tell me what you think of Bunnyx in the comments. Welcome to part 20 of my Miraculous Redesign series, where today we are doing Argos, aka Felix Grom Devonley / Felix Fathom. Spoilers ahead. Before we get into the meat of this, I just want to take a minute and say thank you. If you've been following the series since the start, thank you so much for sticking around. This has been a long journey. We've either been at it for over a year or under a year, depending on if you decide to count Ladybug as the start of the series, or Viperion, because honestly, it could go either way. I do tend to call Viperion part 3, so I guess that does mean Ladybug started it all. But either way, the series technically started out on a whim. But man, am I glad I followed through. And if you've just found the series recently, like in the last couple of parts, thank you to you guys as well. And if this is the first part you're seeing, I hope you go back and watch the others. Because fun little fact, for both my new guys and possibly even some of my older viewers, this is not my first attempt of Argos. I've done him before, but I botched it. This was before I was doing the characters in order, but his botch attempt led me to do Rena Rouge. And for many reasons, I am happy I did that. Mostly because her video, Rena Rouge's video, remains, as of right now at least, is the third most viewed video on my page. She used to be the second, but she has since been overtaken by Purple Tigress. But that doesn't really matter right now, because I have really enjoyed doing this series. And as much as I'm sad to see it go, I'm also kind of relieved. I've barely drawn anything not a part of this series in the last year. And that's not just for TikTok, that's in my private life too. So I am excited to be doing more again. However, right now, here is Argos. But so yes, as previously stated, I have in fact attempted to draw Argos before. However, knowing what my skill level was at the time, I botched him so bad and I hate him so much. I will say he's kind of grown on me with time, but I still like the new version better. But due to those reasons, I never actually made an official video for him. Though I also never tried to hide him, you just gotta know where on my page to look. However, I am not going to make you dig for that. Here's a picture. Now please allow me the honor to roast my own artwork for a minute. His hair looks like seaweed. His skin is patchy as fuck. I don't know what I was thinking with the colors. His suit is a slightly altered version of his canon design. His hood is stupid as hell. The boots are somehow the best part about this design. And also what's going on with those eyes. And in all conclusion, I absolutely hate it. And the accidental irony of me hating it means that everybody I show it to loves it. For some reason that I wish I knew. But it was sort of due to that initial, what in my eyes was failure, that made me really nervous to do Mayura. I put off doing her for as long as I feasibly could. But doing her and having her come out as successfully as she did makes me, for one, kind of disappointed in how her video came out. Might re-upload it, but more importantly, really re-encouraged me when going into Argos this time. So let's talk about him. I was originally going to use the exact same colors I used on Mayura for Argos. So he was going to have this deep blue jacket with the underbody being purple. But then I got to his pants and I kind of stumbled because I didn't know what to do for his pants. Because this is your reminder, Mayura's in a leotard with tights. So I took a step back and rethought things a little. I could keep the blue jacket because peacocks' necks are that sort of deep blue color, but everything else had to change slightly. His pants wound up being this color that is quite literally called peacock green and peacock blue, so that wound up working out surprisingly well. And then what I was originally going to make purple, I wound up making this sort of bluish color that you will see later. But I was hesitant to do that because I had fumbled his colors once, and I did not want to fumble them again. But then I had recalled why I had made Mayura's colors so dark to begin with. She was evil, an assistant to the main villain. I made her colors dark to complement Hawkmoth, and remembering that made me a bit more comfortable with the inherent brightness of Argos's colors. That and also just remembering, like, the inherent nature of peacocks, like, as a bird. Especially the males, very showy, very dramatic. And this is now where I say, I know a lot of people don't like Felix. To which I say, I am not one of them. Now in my mind, there are two ways of hating a character. Hating them for their character, and hating the way they're written. And given those two, I can maybe see how some people can dislike him for his character. He's done a lot of shitty things, a lot of things for his own self-gain, and again, just all around hasn't been the greatest person. However, you cannot deny that he is a well-written character. Considering he has so far appeared in about 9 episodes, and has had more development than characters that have appeared in 60 or more. I think another reason why I like him as much as I do is just because of his pure moral complexity. Let's just say on the list of fictional characters who I would love to sit down, have lunch with while I pick at their brain for several hours, he is very high on that list. And for those of you who are here for the rewrite stuff, don't worry, he will not be losing his moral complexity. I'm also moving his introduction up to season 2. Look, I have my reasons, one of them being I want him to play a much larger role and I want to flesh him out more. Now I know I could just move him to be earlier in season 3, and note, that could end up happening. I am still working on season 1, so things are subject to change. But another thing I want to do within my rewrite is make the differences between him and Adrian more noticeable. They're cousins, not siblings, for crying out loud, and yes, their moms are identical twins, but again, they're cousins. So Felix's eyes now lean a little bit more blue rather than green. His hair is a bit of a cooler blonde, and it's also pinned straight. Meanwhile, Adrian is more of that warm, goldy blonde. He has curls, his eyes are very much more of a true green, and I'm also giving him freckles because why the hell not? But at a glance, they could still very well be mistaken for each other. Anyways, I'm excited to see what they do with him in season 6. That is, if he appears at all. He's made a few cameo appearances here and there, and he's also in both the intro and the outro, so I would assume he is. Anyways, I debated for a long time whether or not to give him a normal skin tone or to give him purple skin like both Mayura and his canon self. However, I wound up deciding against it. There was already so much going on in terms of colors on this guy that he just needed something more neutral to ground him. And actually, to draw attention back to his design for a minute, I really wanted him to come off as very formal and really high class, because technically he is. His uncle is a fashion designer, and then his maternal grandparents are a lord and a lady. So I feel like he would have some sense of style, and I think I accomplished that challenge, if I do say so myself. Well, okay, it's not even like it was that much of a challenge, especially considering his season 6 outfit seems to be almost the exact same as the season 5 outfit, so, you know. I'm not working with very much, but considering what I did have to work with, I really like how he came out. And I really hope you guys have enjoyed the series. Let me know what you all think of Argos in the comments below. And I hope you're willing to stick around and see what I do in the future. And now, without any further delay, here is the final Argos redesign. I also sort of figured that maybe as a last hurrah to the series, we could put him in the binder together. Normally a thing I do off camera after the videos, but why not do it together this time? So now that he's in the cover, let's get the binder in frame, flip to a clean page. Wow, this is taking me a lot longer than I thought, and oh shit.